having you here. As Ignacio just said, my name is Kelli Williams. I am the State Suicide Prevention Specialist for the state of Arizona. I work at AHCCCCS, the state Medicaid agency, and I'm presenting today with my colleague and dear friend, John Perez. John, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm John Perez, and I'm with the NARBHA Institute up in Flagstaff. My relationship with ACMF goes back, I think right to the beginning, when I was the regional administrator for the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So long history, looking forward to talking to everybody today.
All right, with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Hey, John, I just wanted to mention that we're still hearing you very echoey. I don't know if maybe we can try to get you a little closer. That could help a little bit.
Okay, I'll try to get much closer and see if that helps. Is it a little better now?
That's actually quite better. Yes, thank you so much.
I'll speak from about here.
Okay, well, today's learning objectives for our presentation are to remind everyone in the room, if you have not already received a suicide prevention training, we're going to do a brief refresher on what some of the warning signs are for suicide, why this conversation is so important related to weapons, both in Arizona and nationally, and then also identify and understand what behavioral health resources are available in our community. Those resources may look different in urban and rural populations, but we really want to talk about when the warning signs dictate that you need to act immediately and get either yourself or someone who you're concerned about into care. To set the stage for today's conversation, we want to review what suicide looks like in our state. Western states in particular in the United States have some of the highest rates of suicide nationally. In Arizona, suicide is the 8th leading cause of death, with about 1,400 individuals who die per year. The majority of those deaths are by firearm. The majority of those deaths are in rural Arizona, not urban Arizona. And the largest percentage of individuals dying by suicide are those 65 and older. In Arizona, typically Caucasian men by firearm. Many of those men have either served as a first responder or as a veteran. Many have been trained as part of their profession on how to handle a firearm, which is why, again, this conversation is so important. If we're interested in reducing the statewide and really national rate of suicides, we need to have more conversations about what do we do about the firearms in our home if someone who is in our home is dealing with a behavioral health crisis. That behavioral health crisis could look like an increase in alcohol use or an increase in another substance. It could be a lot of different things, and we'll go into some of those today. We want to be very clear that in this conversation where we're talking about securing weapons and gun hygiene, which is the more technical term that comes down from military talk, that we are in no way discouraging firearm ownership. We recognize that that's a right, but we do want to also talk about how 70% of suicides in Arizona and 70% of gun-related deaths in the United States are suicides. And so to reduce that number, we need to have a more practical conversation about how to separate individuals who are going through a very hopefully a brief period of suicidal crisis and a behavioral health crisis and keeping them from a tool that can then go on to lead to their permanency. And so how do we have that conversation, especially among individuals who see a firearm as part of their identity? How do we talk about being able to still continue your same identity, whether the firearm was previously part of your profession, whether you've served in the military, et cetera, and yet also encourages individuals to recognize that having this firearm in their possession for the time being is not in their best well-being. It's a tricky conversation, and it's one we've been having at a statewide level for many years. And thankfully, we've partnered with organizations like the Arizona Coalition for Military Families and also our partners up at the NARBHA Institute to have a more in-depth conversation about that today. Before we get too far down the road about suicide, I did want to just mention some update to the language related to suicides. On the right or on the left-hand side, you'll see words that are in red. This is a dated language that we are trying to not use any longer when we talk about suicide. Instead, you may hear me say today, individuals died by suicide rather than committed. The word commit often has a positive connotation. And so the language is important related to all of this. The newest one, which you may hear me trip up on today because it is new enough that it's not quite in my habits yet, is instead of saying attempted suicides, but the new language is non-fatal suicide. So if you have any questions about these, again, please feel free to throw those in the chat box and we can talk about them moving forward. To reduce stigma related to accessing mental health services, we do really want to use the word suicide when that word is appropriate, rather than other flowery language such as passed away, took his own life, etc. So what does the data in Arizona tell us? The Arizona data looks a lot like national data. We know that 71% of gun deaths in Arizona are suicides, which is pretty remarkable. We also know that our rural individuals are more at risk for suicide than individuals in Maricopa and Pima counties in particular. You may know that a couple years ago, this Arizona state legislature passed a new law requiring the Arizona Department of Health Services to review all deaths in Arizona and compare them to a national registry of individuals who've served in the military. So we could get an accurate number of individuals who've served in the military who then went on to die by suicide. The way that was handled previously was that upon death, the death certificate was completed either by a medical examiner or in partnership with a funeral home director. And the next of kin was asked some very specific questions, including, did that individual ever serve in the military? That, of course, is open to the next of kin knowing that person's full history, knowing and wanting to suggest that the person served in the military. So we've removed that human factor from this process with the state law to give us a more accurate look at where individuals who served in the military are dying by suicide in our state. Part of the reason why that's so important to our work is that we have 4 people on our team for a population of more than 7 million in Arizona. You know, I know you're all here in our state, and so you know how big this state really is. You can spend hours driving through single counties in northern Arizona. And so how do we make sure that we are targeting our prevention messaging very specifically to use our time as smartly as we can, as efficiently as we can? What that report showed us for the first year is that Gila County, so the Copper Corridor, Payson all the way to Miami Globe, has the highest rate of suicides for individuals who've served in the military in Arizona. Prior to that report, we were not working in Gila County. We weren't avoiding it, but we thought, foolishly, incorrectly, that the majority of our prevention efforts should be focused on larger populated communities. What that report showed us instead was that we really, if we're trying to change the suicide rate among our individuals who served in the military, we need to focus on Gila County, Yavapai County, the Prescott community, Navajo, Apache, Mojave, and La Paz. Those are among the greatest for individuals who are at risk and for those who have died. And so we are shifting our efforts to partner with county health departments statewide, but specifically in rural communities, to try to make sure that our frontline healthcare workers, our community healthcare workers, our emergency room employees, our veteran service organizations, our Be Connected navigators are all talking to each other about what services are available, what the warning signs are, and how to direct folks into care. Some of the other interesting data that we have on hand, because we sit at the state Medicaid agency and we have more than 2 million Arizonans currently enrolled in our health plan, we're able to go back and look at some of the things that people were treated for prior to dying by suicide for those who are enrolled in Medicaid. And what we have found is that chest pain is not uncommon. Many individuals have seen either a primary care physician or an emergency room within 30 days prior to their deaths by suicide. And that suicide ideation and chronic depression are also can be warning signs for individuals who then go on to die by suicide. We'll talk a little bit more about that next. So what are some of the warning signs? If you have someone who, and for this conversation today, let's talk about that 65 and older individual who served in the military, male or female. Perhaps this person lives in your home or they're related to you. Have they gone through a major loss recently? That could be the loss of a spouse. It could be retirement. Even though they know that even though they were looking forward to retirement, all of a sudden they feel this lack of purpose. It could be the loss of, it could be a poor financial decision where now they don't know how they're going to take care of themselves financially and they don't want to be a burden to others. You may see these folks isolate and withdraw from activities that previously brought them joy. If they're living in your home, you may see sleep and mood changes. This can be particularly difficult to determine if the person is not living in your home. Again, you can see substance use issues. What we know is that the majority of individuals who die by suicide in Arizona have alcohol in their system at the point of death, meaning they are not making decisions with their full decision-making capabilities. The reason that's important to note is that if you have someone in your home who you're worried about, who you've noticed is, or maybe not even in your home, but somebody you've noticed who you think is exhibiting some of these warning signs, trying to get them to either cut back or eliminate alcohol for a period of time is a really smart move. We know that it's a depressant and it's something that hopefully those folks can step away from for a period of time, recognizing they can come back to it in a healthy way or a healthier way once their behavioral health crisis has resolved. Giving away prized possessions is also a warning sign. There was an interesting study in the Seattle area recently within the last couple of years where they noticed that individuals who were dying by suicide were relinquishing their pets at the Humane Society prior to going on to die by suicide. So they started doing some very targeted outreach at the Humane Society to try to interact with individuals who were relinquishing pets. And they saw almost an immediate reduction in suicides in that community. So when you think about giving away prized possessions, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that has a lot of monetary value, but it could be something that's very dear to that person. And of course, possible planning. If you hear someone use the language like, if something happened to me, would you know how to get a hold of my adult children? Or if something happened to me, would you know how to get into my home? Or if something, et cetera, you get the idea. All of those are concerns. So for these red flags, if you see any of these go on for 2 weeks or longer, we really encourage you to get immediately involved in this person's business, essentially. We encourage you to help them make an appointment to see a behavioral health therapist, to make an appointment with their primary care physician with someone to help get them into care. You do not have to make a move on this if you're concerned about the individual. But we really recommend that if you notice any of these for that period or longer, that you act ASAP. So how do you act? We recommend that you get this person alone in a private place, that you make sure you don't have any distractions, that you turn off your cell phone, that you just get them, you're giving them your full attention, you are actively listening, and you ask the question directly. The way that looks will be different depending on the person you're interacting with. But for example, if you're asking someone who you really care about, let's say this is a family member, it may be difficult for you to separate your own emotion from the conversation. And we really encourage you to try to do that as best as you can. In other words, what we would encourage you to say is, I've noticed that that you don't seem to be acting like yourself lately. You've got me concerned, and I would like to know, are you thinking about dying by suicide? You are removing any of the emotional stuff that you may want to bring to that conversation by recognizing that the most important thing here is letting this person know that you are listening to them and that you will help walk them through the next steps, whatever those steps may look like, and that this is something that he or she can easily recover from. They can get into treatment. There are lots of opportunities for this temporary behavioral health crisis to resolve. And so if the individual says, yes, I am thinking about dying by suicide, or if they don't say that they're thinking about dying by suicide, either way, you can let them know that you're going to walk alongside them and help them get into care. You're going to help them navigate whatever the next period of time looks like. Again, that could be putting them in your car and immediately driving them to an emergency room if the person tells you, yes, I'm thinking of dying by suicide. Or if the person says, no, I'm not, but I don't feel like myself. It could be sitting down at the computer immediately and trying to figure out how to get that person into a behavioral health appointment ASAP. Again, we really encourage you not to give your own personal advice other than letting them know that they are not alone. This is something they can recover from and that you are going to be there for them. So if they do have a plan, if they say, yes, I am suicidal, I've been thinking about this, it is an absolute emergency for that individual. If you only remember one thing that we've shared here today, please let it be never leave a suicidal individual alone for any reason. It is now your responsibility to be physically present with that person until you can hand them off to a health professional of some sort. We recommend that you call the crisis line for your county. That crisis lines for right now vary by county. However, the individual on the other end of the phone has been trained in how to handle that phone call. They will be able to assess the situation and determine, do we need to send a mobile team to this person? Do you need to drive to an emergency room? Is there a behavioral health hospital nearby that the person can go to? Is there a first psychosis center that the person could go to? What does that look like? In the meantime, we also encourage you to remove means from the home. This is where the gun conversation is especially important. We recognize, again, that having conversations about firearms with individuals is a difficult and tricky conversation. So what we would recommend is that at a minimum, that the ammunition is completely removed from the home. Ideally, that the guns are also removed from the home for the period of time, along with any prescription or over-the-counter medications that are not necessary, and alcohol. And again, never leave a suicidal individual alone for any reason. So moving on, I'm going to hand this off to my colleague John now to talk a little bit more about what our Secure Your Weapon Toolkit looks like and how we can better connect with individuals who have served in the military, who may have firearms in their home, and how to create a plan for what to do with those firearms if a behavioral health crisis arises. It's you now, John. Oh, you're on mute. There you are.
First, I'm going to do a sound check. Am I sounding like I'm in a barrel?
It's better.
It's better. I'll tell you what, I got an idea. Here's my smiling face. I think I am going to go off the video so I can get closer and really use the computer as a mic. So let's see if this works. All right, now I'm very close. Is the sound better? We're better? Okay, good.
It is.
Let us get started. Now, in terms of sharing the screen, Kelly, are you able to advance slides for me? Is that okay? Would that be easier? Good.
I'm doing it, John.
Excellent, excellent. Now, let us start here. All right, let's take a deep breath and take a step back. And let me tell you a little bit of a story about how this effort came to be. Secure Your Weapon is something that has been discussed and really thought seriously about for a few years now. And it goes back to the fundamental approaches that have been used to try to engage veterans, the veteran community, in suicide prevention initiatives, and virtually all of them were what we call weakness-based. And what that means is that you would have a campaign or you would have an effort that was basically, the foundation for it was one of, we are worried about you. We are worried about you as a veteran. We're worried that you have weapons. We're worried about what you may do with them. And while the literature is pretty clear that if you're able to put a few steps between an impulse to do something and then being able to access the means to do it, that you can see pretty substantial reductions in suicide. But the messaging that was coming out from various places, and these are august places, it really was either turning off or people were just dismissing it because, again, it was one of weakness. So people have been talking, and I really think it came to a head with a lunch, and this lunch was a couple of years ago. I was part of it, and talking around the table about what were we missing, what what was it that we weren't doing right? And I don't remember who it was. And said, well, it's really simple. You just secure the weapon. And the people around the table, all vets, looked at each other. It's like, well, yeah, that's exactly right. But it took us a second to realize that, wait a second, that this is it. This is basically, the foundational message that we want to be able to communicate, and what goes into that. And that's when this really started to develop. And there were several things that came out of it. One was that basically the civilian community and has a fear of firearms, rightfully so, but that there is a fundamental misunderstanding of the military experience with them, specifically that for most veterans, the weapon itself is a protector, and that it is something that, for many people, myself included, help keep them alive. And the weapon, while an extraordinarily powerful instrument, is one that most all of us grew up with in the military, know how to utilize, and also know how to safeguard. So it's like, what were we forgetting, and how can we bring this back? The second piece to this is that this is not a weakness-based. This is a standard. And because it's a standard, this takes away a whole bunch of stuff out of it. It depathologizes, it moves away from the fear base. And so this is how the initiative developed. As we're talking right now, we are really marking the beginning of rollout of the initiative itself. So welcome to the first installment of the Secure Your Weapon Initiative. Kelly, if I could get the next slide, please. So, as I was talking about, this is, the phrase comes from a time-honored military standard, and this dates back, gosh, I don't know how long. I think the first time I heard it, it was from my father, who, to give you an idea of age, was the last of the horse cavalry, going back to World War II. But it was a standard statement. And what exactly does it mean? Kelly, slide, please. It's this. It's very simple. Your weapon is on your person or within your direct control, or it's secured, preferably locked. For my experience on the old 11 Bravo, dating back to the Stone Age as well. And we have what we call triple lock security. So if your weapon was not issued to you and with you, it was in an arms room or in a secure locker, not unlike these, where it literally took 3 locks to actually be able to remove the weapon. And this is what we are now starting to look at again, to say, you know what? I think we forgot a lot of this, and it's time that we revisit it. Slide, please. So the initiative itself, though, although we started with the actual behavior, the more we started to look at it, the more we saw that not only was this a strength-based or potential for a strength-based initiative, it also brought the military and veteran community really to the fore, to be able to not just practice it themselves, but be able to demonstrate it, and if we're able to do this effectively, be able to share it with the larger community about this is how you you safeguard your weapons. Doesn't matter whether you're military or not, but we in the military have been indoctrinated into this. This is how we do it. This is the expectation. And if we are able to model that, that we'll be able to share it with the community. And if we could go to the next slide, please. And here is what we hope will be some magic here. To start at the 12 o'clock and going up to for the military standard. And that's what I've been talking about. This is what we do. It's deeply ingrained from the moment you were first issued a rifle through to now, and it becomes second nature. You don't even think about it. This is just who we are, what we do. Now that was how it started. Now if you go down to the second slice there, the 4 to 8, you see that we really want to take a next step. Not only is this what we do, which is the standard for veterans themselves and what we expect of each other, but we also want to engage, to join us in what we do. And then the final slice here is really utilizing the respect and place that veterans have within the larger community to encourage the public to use and respect that military standard. And if we go on to the next slide, please. And basically, as we distilled the messaging, it really came down to 3 things at its most basic level. And the first one is, as a veteran, your actions serve as examples to others, particularly in this kind of an environment where we're talking about weapon use and safety. And so what we do and who we are, what we do, does serve as an example, not just for each other, but also for the larger community. Next slide, please. And 2, that we are held to a higher standard for weapon and weapon safety. It's pretty straightforward. All of this is not complicated. So this is not something that you need to write down and remember, particularly in the veteran community. It's just stuff that you are and have been. And number 3, please. Next slide, I'm sorry. The final piece is that our actions will communicate those norms, and the patch, for those of you that don't know, is from the infantry school, Army Infantry School, and follow me, meaning let us lead the way. Let us be those who will help really disseminate the information. Now, I want to stop here for a second. Wait a second. We've got one more. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. I didn't really talk about this slide at the beginning, but I want to do so now. What you're looking at is one of 4 specially produced and issued M17 pistols that are issued to the NCOs in charge of the Sentinels at Arlington. And the reason we really chose this photograph is because the symbolism is so strong and in our view, something that would be relevant and memorable to those in the veteran community. The pistols themselves were made as a symbol. Everything from the wood on the grip, which came from the ship that brought across the first unknown First World War, to the slide serrations on the slide itself, which is Roman numeral 21, which is the number of steps that the Sentinel traverses across their their posts when they are on guard. And the pieces of and the symbology of these kinds of icons, if you will, become important to the effort that we are trying to instill. And to remember, who we are, where we came from, the importance of these things, and how to be able to utilize them with the public at large. So as we look at this now, we started to disseminate some testing, took it out to various people, because one of the things we have not talked about is polarization and politicization of weapons and weapon safety. And we really did want to have something that was politically neutral. And we believe this is. This and our effort, we don't care if you have a howitzer, just make sure it's secured. Now, having said that, as an infantryman, I don't know how the hell you secure a howitzer, but I'm sure there's a way to do it. But the point of it really is that it's whatever it is that you have or is within your position or that you own, you have to make sure you secure it. It is just that simple. And the means to do so are really pretty straightforward. And if we can engage the veteran military community to act as active advocates for this, it will not only be a positive for the community, it also lifts and it also empowers the military community, veteran community, in ways that are not one of danger or fear, but really one of this is a tradition, this is what we learned, and this is the experience and knowledge base that we bring back that we can now share with the general public. So we are hopeful that the initiative itself is going to also act as a door to be able to take next steps. For example, these are the things that Kelli was talking about. Is how are you able to access care? How are you able to connect this with the service array that is out there, but be able to do it in a positive way. So, keep your eyes on or watch this space as this starts to develop. We're hopeful, and our institute, NARBHA Institute, has already devoted at least $20,000 as a first award to be able to get this up and out and disseminated. And if you're interested in being part of this, absolutely, you will have our contact information here at the end. I'm easy to get a hold of, and it should not be a great deal of difficulty. That if you're interested, that we will be able to connect you. I think I'm going to leave that there and open it up for questions. We seem to be pretty good on time. And with that, I thank you. And Kelli, back to you and Ignacio to open it up.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, everyone. So if you have any questions at this point, please type them up in the chat box so we can answer your questions. Thank you.
Also, we should mention that if you need gun locks, if you have firearms in your home and you need gun locks or you want gun locks to distribute through your work in the community, our VAs have gun locks available for distribution, free gun locks. They don't fit every firearm, but they fit many of them. And if you have any questions about getting your hands on those, please feel free to send me an email or contact me, and I will be happy to connect you with that resource that's closest to your community.
Did we scare everybody away?
We might have. All right, well, we'll give you guys the gift of time, I suppose. I have a few minutes until before the next session. Thank you again for sitting through this and listening to our conversation today. We really appreciate it. And we hope that you, if you have anybody in your life who you are worried about, that you will make an effort today to reach out to them and have a conversation with them about their mental health. And if they have firearms in the home, that you'll help them create a plan to secure them and keep everyone safe.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.